Have you ever noticed how some rock guitarists seem to be really good at coming up with riffs and parts that can bring you perilously close to wanting to dance? Yes, even you. Guitarists like Rage Against the Machine's Tom Morello, for example. Well, today we are going to look at 3 different musical elements that will hopefully help you make your riff sound a little bit groovier, for want of a slightly less 1970s word. Anyway, let's check it out. Okay, first of all then, we have a musical device called syncopation. And what this means is basically playing off the beat. So to go into a little bit more detail, if you listen to pretty much any piece of music you care to, you should be able to latch onto a strong underlying pulse. And 9 times out of 10, that pulse is going to be easily counted in groups of 4. And this is what we call a 4/4 time signature. So for example, I've got my little pretend band here that I've just set up, playing us a nice groove that goes like this. Just that on a loop. And if we latch onto the underlying pulse and count it in groups of 4, that would go like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And so on and so forth. Hopefully that's pretty straightforward. And when you first learn to play an instrument, you usually are taught to aim for the beat. That's how you get used to identifying a pulse in a piece of music. So you would typically aim on the beat, like that. But if we play a syncopated rhythm, we're going to play in between those main beats like this. And straight away, hopefully you can hear we've added a little bit of rhythmic interest to it. If you're interested in spotting some syncopation for yourself, it's a really good idea to listen to any kind of a riff and see if you can tap along to the underlying pulse and just see if you can identify which notes are on the beat and which notes are off the beat. A riff like the bass line to Feel Good Inc. by Gorillaz is a really, really good place to start. So that is one element we're going to incorporate into our riff, syncopation. On to the next. Alright, and in our quest to be groovy, I would suggest another worthwhile ingredient is something called staccato. Now this is an Italian word that roughly translates as detached. And in musical terms, what that has come to mean is basically a note that is cut short. So instead of playing notes that ring on for a whole beat, for example, we get something a little bit more like this. And you'll notice by incorporating those rests, by making those notes kind of clipped and short, we get a little bit more bounce and air in the rhythm. If you think of any kind of typically funky riff, like Superstition by Stevie Wonder or Play That Funky Music by Wild Cherry, have a listen and you'll notice just how staccato a lot of those notes are played. They're really given room to breathe and fit with the other instruments, and it really creates a sense of bounce, a sense of groove. Okay, so we're on the way. We've got a bit of staccato, a bit of syncopation. Let's look at what we can do with the notes themselves. Okay, note choices then. When crafting a riff, it's very, very typical for guitarists to reach for something called the pentatonic scale. So much so it would almost be easier to list riffs that are not based on the pentatonic scale. But suffice to say, from traditional bluesy sounding things like Voodoo Child by Jimi Hendrix and Wishing Well by Free, through to sort of more punky garagey riffs like All Day and All of the Night by the Kinks and Song 2 by Blur. The common thread is the pentatonic scale, specifically the minor pentatonic scale. And in our key of F sharp, that would give us the notes F sharp, A, B, C sharp, and E, before returning to F sharp. And we can do great work with that, 5 notes, or as the Greek would say, pente, hence pentatonic scale. But it can be nice to add a little bit of colour, or as the Greeks would say, chromos, hence chromatic scale. And if you're foolish enough to start to be impressed by my command of the Greek language, then don't be, that is pretty much the full extent of it. But anyway, some typical chromatic additions to the scale would be between the 4th and 5th degree of the scale. So in this case, that would be the B and the C sharp. Very, very common to include the diminished 5th, which would be a C note. So we've added a little bit of melodic intrigue straight away. But also, there's 2 notes we can bridge at the top here between the E natural and the octave F sharp note there. Quite common to incorporate the F natural, the major 7th. Does sound a little bit strange when you play it as a scale and when you isolate those notes. But it has a very common usage throughout rock music. If you think of the main riff in Black Dog by Led Zeppelin, or the bridge riff in Iron Man by Black Sabbath, you'll hear that kind of thing being used. And call me controversial, I think Tom Morello has listened to quite a bit of Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath. Just a feeling. So we're going to try and put all of those elements together to come up with a riff over our groove. It's going to go something like this. And there we have it, a few different ideas to consider when writing your next riff. Really hope there was something of interest there. If so, please consider liking, subscribing, commenting and all that usual business. Really, really do appreciate it. Thank you. I'll see you with something else very, very soon. Cheers.